Welcome, one and all, to this video. This video won't be like the other videos that I uploaded recently. This video will be about varying levels of philosophy. What do I mean by varying levels of philosophy? I mean, I love to philosophize. I love thinking about things, considering things on a deep level. Not necessarily in the kind of mystical sense, as long as I'm wearing this disguise. I'll keep it very brief. When I think philosophy, I think marvels. I think consideration for others' well-being. I consider Machiavellian the idea of would-be kings and those who must and those who do endure. You know, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of understandings in the life that we live around philosophy. And mostly around what it might even be to be a sage. Because most people aren't sagely when they give their advice. Most times they're a little more obscured. Obscured by the way that they pose, the way that they refrain from posing. A lot of philosophy tends to be not necessarily idle speculation, but it does tend to lean into the category of somewhat a way of imagining the world and somewhat a way of avoiding the world. Because philosophies change and shift the dynamic of wherever it's born, and it's born usually around the time in which it is considered to be the most practical in its use by the philosopher at the time. However, all philosophies, as they've immortalized themselves in every category, also have philosophized their way into every philosophy ever born. No philosopher just talks about philosophy without ever mentioning any of the big guys. Machiavelli, Socrates, Plato, plenty of names. Those are the ones that I mainly focused on. I don't really focus on any of the others. Not necessarily because there's anything wrong with their philosophies, it's just sometimes their names are really long. And there's only so much of me to go around, you know? However, the trick and the trinket and the relationship in between is that much of philosophy is about, I want to say predication, but that comes with a very unique, say euphoric? Kinda. It comes with a very speculative mind. It comes with a lot of critique. Because regardless of the philosopher you follow and the philosophies you embed into your own life, you're either living them and they work for you, or you're kind of on the sideline wondering how they imply in your own life. And there aren't really a whole lot of new philosophers walking the block these days. No playful warrior philosophers. They utilize their philosophy in a way that strips everything else out and kind of just gives the raw impression. Not only the raw impression in what you can imagine, but also in the raw impression that moves things forward. Because there's always progression. There's never a place without progression. However, when it comes to philosophy and all the things that can be considered philosophy, it's speculations that are observations about the less physical aspect of our existence, the more mental, but also the beliefs that construct a worldview. Much like in Machiavelli's discussion of kings or rulers, the relationship there has always been and will always be that kings, lords, princes, they will act in accordance to what makes them look most favorable, rather than what is true, or what is in the best interest of their people. Because, come now, we know, yes, we know there's quite a few individuals out there who put on a very good show They look very appealing. They look like they know everything, but they don't, and they never did, because nobody knows everything. And that's just fact. There's not a single individual who knows more, or at least knows all things more than you do, more than I do, more than that Mike does, because that's just not true. There's no relationship there that allows it to be what it is. We must assume that a person knows something. We must assume that at the end of the day, they're going to get something out of their approach. So Machiavelli warns against, in a way, undue influence. Their influence and understanding is almost that of a psychopath knowing how to talk their way into your good graces, despite the fact that they might have like a zillion bodies in their backyard. That aspect of the philosophy of the prince and the princely ways, that relationship is all about that. It's people who can appeal to your better nature and show a better nature, one that is appealing, one that is friendly, one that is just romantic, beautiful even, but specifically isn't about that, because that person doesn't really care about the flowers and the beauty and the benevolence. They're more animalistic in their approaches. For what's a weaver of tales if not the oldest storytellings in the world? They're not for decoration. They're not for anyone in particular. Everything that is considered animalistic by trait is also something that human beings must deal with, contend with even. But it's not about that. It's never been about how beautiful an appearance is. It's not about how gorgeous the manufactured script happens to be. It's whether or not it has an impact in the first place. Because we only care about impact around here. We only care whether or not something is true. You see, the relationship, the connection. When I don my hat, I choose to be a little more cynical. I choose to be a little more analytical in my approach, because it's uses versus show. It is uses versus everything else that actually transpires to make our lives better, or it's constantly things that are making our lives worse. But it's wisdom that shows whether or not the truth has an impact. For you see, truth without wisdom is not. Always is not. Because neither can exist without the other. And if there is no truth, there is no wisdom. There is nothing to gain by doing anything. Nothing from nothing is nothing. And 0 against anything is still 0. So, the relationship and the consistency of philosophy is that things like Socrates' cave, Plato's cave, whichever cave it is. I love caves. However, the idea that you're inherently born in darkness, you're inherently born in a place where there is no light. This can be a place for you. This can be a place of solitude. This can be a place of solace. Never in my life have I ever inspired somebody to live in the desert until I spoke to someone who was philosophical. Somebody who believed in philosophy and the ability to ingrain noticing into everyday dialogue. What does that even look like? What is the translation of something like that? Well, it definitely isn't just any conversation, now is it? It's a conversation that is wise. It is a conversation that implies that everything you could ask is seen. And anything that's seen shows up. There is no form of duality because you speak to both sides. You don't show up with just a bold-faced lie. You also don't show up with anything less than what you have to offer. And there's always more to offer with philosophy. When you talk, when you engage, when you show up, well, you did the hardest thing that anyone could have done, but nobody does do. You show up. Show up to recognize, man, this feeling I'm having underneath everything else makes me uncomfortable. I really dislike being in this space. I really dislike being here in particular. I don't enjoy all the things that are taking place around me. However, the truth is different. The truth inspires something else. But I'll let truth speak to that. However, right now it is time for wisdom. So what is wisdom without truth? What is truth without wisdom? You conspire, you deal with things, you let a world catch on fire, you let people get ripped away from their families, you let your world and your civilizations burn without wisdom and truth. Because so often we can't discern which one is actually telling the truth, which one is actually valuable, which one is less than valuable, which one betrays itself, which one upholds itself. Which is which? Which one is trying its best to do what's best for everyone, and in the highest way possible, not the greater good? There is no such thing as a greater good. Greater good is just as much a travesty against wisdom as it is anything else. If somebody says that they're the best person, or have the best things, or have the best stuff, it does not require much to fool the perception of another, because perception is everything. I'll say this again for the philosophers in the back. Perception means nothing. Because perception can be anything. You can perceive many different things about me as I speak. You can perceive anything you want. You can perceive absolutely anything. You can perceive that I'm an enemy, or I'm an ally, that I'm a dirty communist, or I'm your best friend, that you've known since the world's hell froze over many millennia ago. Who knows? You can see through any time zone. You can be here, you can be there, you could be anywhere. Because the wisdom that you seek exists in a place where most will never look. And that is in I. That is in presence. That is in pursuit of what it is that you want most. Because there are no differentiating factors that keep one from the other. There is nothing that truly channels all of our viscera from our own containers, our own existence, our own perceptions. Because our perceptions will lead us wherever we want them to. But most of us don't know what that even means. Most of us don't realize that perception is just our way of thinking and feeling in a way that just seeks the most comfortable outcome, without challenging much, without being guided by anything other than notions and assumptions. And notions and assumptions play all kinds of ways with us. And that play can be versatile, it can be dangerous, it can be volatile, but it's always a nightmare, no matter who you speak to. When they see their life going nowhere, when they see their lives basking in the want for everything, they burn. They burn with envy, they burn with sarcasms, they burn with a feud. They hurt. They're engaged in so much pain, they don't know what to do with it. So most people who seek refuge and desire to escape from pain, they know not what they've done. They know not what they do because they can hardly understand themselves. They hardly understand anything that has taken place. They don't understand why anyone does what they do. Because why would they? Why would most people understand what kind of wisdom there is in the moment, in the time that they're spending here on Earth? Why would anybody think that the way that they see the world, the way that they feel about the world, the way that they feel about other people, the way they feel about themselves, is a message in and of itself that requires the truth to uncover, and through that truth allows tension to be built for wisdom to grow out of it. For truly, what is truth without wisdom, and wisdom without truth? Here in the US, we quite literally live in a dumpster fire. There is no if, ands, or buts. There is no greatest country in the world. There is none of this idea that needs to stick around. There's no value in me pretending that the world is a great place right now. There's no value in that. There's not a goddamn thing. No value in any of it. Because why would there be? If I were lying and said there are many different things about the things that are happening here that I'm comfortable with, I would be a liar. And it's not lying because, Susie stole a pen from Jake's bag. Whether or not that was true, and whether or not that pen ever shows up, or whether or not actually I was the one who stole the pen, it leaves much to the imagination, because that's not truth. Truth isn't some subjective thing. You can't just walk into a room and be like, ah, yes, this room is good, while another person walks in and says, this room is awful, it is bad, it is terrible. Because philosophy, in truth's hands, is just what lies underneath everything else. Because there is an underneath everything else. Always has been an underneath everything else. Because regardless which side you stand on, both sides is true. Because things are both literal and metaphorical. Matter bilocates. That's a scientific fact. Matter can exist in two places at once. It doesn't matter whether or not that's believable. It doesn't even matter whether or not you can prove such a thing. Just as matter, once observed, acts solid when in the reality that you do not see, that has no witness, everything moves like water bouncing off of surfaces. So both statements are true. Both statements exist, but it's a very fabric of philosophy that one can understand the true earnings of a man, the true yearnings of the cave, and the true pain of philosophy. Because to understand philosophy is to understand that what you do with truth in philosophy is not bounce it off of moral dilemma, because there is no moral dilemma as the truth speaks. There will never be a duality, because that is just the truth. There was never duality. There was never morality, because anything you learn through morality, you learn through your parents. They are the ones who gifted you your morality. Not that anyone would ever tell you that, because most people do not understand how good and bad ever got translated in the first place. It's mommy and daddy's problem. And also yours, because you translated it in whichever way kept you alive. Because good meant that you were loved, you were showered, you were given the kingdom. Bad meant you did. So, if it was pain, if telling the truth was both a good and a bad thing, if you spoke to the tension in a room where everybody knows that somebody smells like a walking fart, but nobody wants to say anything, but the child does, and then everybody jumps on the child, or everybody's like, yeah, exactly what the child said. There's two different ways to approach that, isn't there? There might also be a third, but you know how it is. Children, the drunken midgets that they are, and has always been one of those statements that just appears in my life, always states that that is the idea of a child, that they see things as they are. The emperor in his new clothes, if you were. there is, and always has been, the truth, which is that my assumptions about life is wrong, just as anybody else's assumptions about life is wrong. What we make important is usually incorrect. Not that it is invalid, it is just incorrect. It is in a corrective state. We are constantly trying to correct ourselves. That's the truth. I can feel like I don't belong. Therefore, I would love to color my hair. I would love to just reject everyone before they can reject me, and I can live my life isolated and free. But that would ultimately be very problematic, because living on your own isn't necessarily something that is very healthy to your mental state, especially if you trap yourself there, because there is such thing as trapping yourself there as well. The lone wolf, if you will, the lone Olva, if you will. There is a lot to unpack when it comes to truth. But the one thing I want to leave in this very introductive way of engaging is that you do assume something, just as I assume something, that I must reject other people to stay alive. It's not true, and also that means I'm rejecting myself in order to live. Means a lot. However, that is my assumption. That is a belief that I hold. It is a part of my tapestry, if you will, because I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to create a connection between mythology and philosophy in a way that just exists, because of course it does. Both are true. They just don't exist necessarily in a way that we understand. And I don't necessarily mean mythologies of old. Mythologies of old, everyone has heard. I will use them as examples, but it's the new mythology. It's the you-thology. Because there is mythology around you. There's mythology around me. There's just a story wrapped up in consequential orders, divisions, gods, beings beyond our recognition or our understanding. However, we are at the roll end, where eventually the hero experiences his own tragic demise. But that's because that's the part of the hero that must be ventured through. For you see, to unearth, your underlying assumption is to unearth all else. It's to give freedom after getting slapped really hard by the truth. Because, as an old mentor put it, the truth shall set you free, but it will bitch slap you first. Which, honestly, if it's just a bitch slap, I'd rather take the bitch slap than living my life in a lie. But I use truth and I use lie very loosely. It is fear that keeps us from the truth. Always has been. It keeps us from our wisdom as well. It is our need to survive that is coded in our fears. That is why philosophy is something that is powerful, yet it can also be talked to death in a way that doesn't allow the true material of our existence to become that of a sage, to become that of a philosopher's stone. Because in truth, the ability to transcend all the things that a philosopher can think about, worry about, and then speak to is to ascend the role of sage, to ascend past philosophy on its own, but to become the philosopher's stone, the very essence that contributes magic to existence again. Because truth and wisdom together inherently involve magic, because both transition you into a way of getting to know yourself and being able to balance yourself back into a state that is wise, that is free of many different illness. The illness truth speaks to is that everyone believes that there is a codependent order between truth as in events and truth as in this is your foundation, this is your structure for existence. Because you come here, you've seen this video, but what is your structure of existence? what do you base your life off of? What is the wisdom that comes to you about that? Because you know it, I know it. Just we never ask the question. So, what is the question? When you are faced with this reality, when you're faced with the truth and the wisdom that comes from knowing that there is more to reality than just who's right and who's wrong, who's good and who's bad, because we've already discussed it's just life or death, love or death. But in reality, it's just struggle, strife, survival, or death. There is no true parent that has ever understood this on a level in which transcends any person's ability to be hurt or emotionally wounded in some way. It's just not going to happen. Everyone gets wounded. However, the wisdom is knowing that despite your injury, nothing has happened to you. You've sustained no pain. I'll stress that. You sustained no injury that has any mark upon you. Physical body, yes. As the host of this body, the polaric stenosis, which is more common in young girls, is an affliction that has happened to this body. It is something that I have endured. It is something that I experienced when I was little, where the stomach lining shuts and doesn't allow food in, so you projectile vomit everything that goes in. And if it remains closed, and as I narrowly escaped death, you will die if you can't feed yourself. You will die if you don't take anything in. That includes water. That includes everything that goes into your mouth. And a small child as I was, the veins burst. Anytime they tried to put an IV in, it took a pediatric surgeon, pediatric doctor, to understand to put the needle, the IV, into the scalp, into the head, because those veins are a lot easier and don't necessarily dehydrate that fast. So, wisdom. Wisdom from that doctor's experience working with children versus someone who doesn't know any better and just realizes this child needs water, needs fluid, needs nourishment, but can't seem to get it to work. That's the relationship between information, knowing what needs to be done, and the wisdom to act on. The experience that teaches you how to utilize the information and all of the parts that are coming to you. But there is secret sauce to this. There is always secret sauce to this. Because this is going to be a point in which I transition to just being very candid as a very specific host that we all have inside of us. And it's one that has been charitably stolen from most by beings who believe themselves to be higher than you, by those who instilled something higher than you through systems and structures, whether it be police or authorities of some kind, whether it be the church. There was always something that wasn't to you. But was that ever true? It's what you really look like underneath it all. It's what you actually want to be, which is it's not being good enough, and not being good enough. It's not powerlessness and being powerful. It's not this or that, as is the root of all of our suffering. It is, in reality, the light the very thing that is everywhere in this room. It is light. Always has been. Always will be. The idea of the divine is such a contradictory force, because the relationship, to really understand it and really unpack it, isn't about this aspect of whether or not you have what it really takes to be who you are, to show up totally as you are, and to keep going. All of that aspect, all of the things that pick you up, and all of the things that touch everything in life is light. It's the very essence and being of everything. But what is light? Light is just existence. It's the very essence of existence. Because no matter what, you're going to be attracted to the person who has the most light pouring out of them. They're kind of childlike. They kind of just enjoy everything. They're not smiling because of something in particular. They're smiling because they just like smiling. They just enjoy their life so much that the light is just beaming out of their eyes. Like laser beams. But that, again, it's association. Everyone has an association with life that is different. And the two that spoke and engaged and did everything, gorgeously everything, to set this up, is truth, is wisdom. Wisdom grows when there's something that you love, and there's something true. It's your light, it's your gift, it's your very essence. It's everything that you are. The idea of Einstein speaking, if you understand frequency, vibration, and there's another one. Vibration. If you know what that quote is, feel free to drop it in the comments down below. Great for engagement when I forget things. Anyway, the relationship, the entire idea and exposure to what your gift is and your essence and the thing that is just true, that just exists in all of us, is light, but it's also love. It is our connection to everything through all time, all space, all everything. Always has been. We kind of are connected to each other. It's kind of like an experience where you meet somebody and you're like, have I seen you before? Have I met you before? Do I know you? Even if you've never met that person a day in your life. I would probably say that to the person who looks at you like, no, I don't think so. You kind of just are. You kind of just exist. But you're not existing for nothing. And that's the reason why this is a conversation for philosophy. Because regardless of who says it, regardless of which big mouth thinks they know better than literally everything in existence, they haven't come into contact with the very vibration that makes us what we are. Because there are two very different vibrations. You can try this out for yourself. Make a circle. Just an imaginary circle. Imagine that you can imagine that you can step into that and step into what you love. Feel that. Imagine that you can feel that. What does that feel like? Does it feel like being on the beach? Because that's what it's like for me. Being on the beach, hearing the waves crash in, hearing the wind through the palm trees, hearing the cry and anguish, hearing the cries of seagulls or other types of birds, tropical birds, in the distance. I love that. And it's an experience. I immediately imagine it to the point where that's just me. I know. I know it. And then the other circle. You can create another one. Don't worry, you can go back to the first one. After this one. You step into this one and just, what do you lack? What does it feel like when you're just lacking? Oh, no, wait. Surviving. When you're just surviving. When you're doing everything in your damnedest to survive. Being in there sucks because it feels like I don't know what's going on. everything is a mess. I needed to fix some things. I need to change everything and forget everything that I've learned up into a point because it's scary. Because that is the rejection space. However, being present with both of these, and again, like I said, you can kind of erase this one, the survival, the lack, and then step back into the one you love, because why not? Everybody needs to experience what they love. There is more to philosophy, to understanding that there is something innate inside of all of us that makes us who we are. It makes us who we are because there is something that is inherent in us. It's not in absence of anything. Because philosophy tends to pose itself as asking the right questions. And there are no right questions. There's just the questions you don't realize you could ask. And there's questions where you realize that there are some things that you kind of lack the experience to truly comprehend, which is fine. You don't know what you don't know. And consciousness and what it means to be conscious, to be loved, to connect and give something that is fundamentally yours to the world, those are all parts of yourself that truly shine when you do. When you shine, when you show up, when you gravitate to the very things that make you live and make you want to live, those are the things that inspire, that draw in fresh air and a fresh existence to what you're living now. That's all a part of philosophy as well. And I think it's more the relationship of Schrodinger's cat, because technically you can choose which reality that box will reveal. The cat will be alive. The cat is dead. But I don't know how many people would actually choose the box with the dead cat. I won't tell anyone if you don't, but man, you know? I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean that more as in everybody has something that they love, but odds are very high that people won't choose the box with a dead cat in it. Unless they're like an anthropologist or somebody who really loves bones or something like that. Who knows? You do you. However, I would personally choose the cat that is alive, because I love cats. The very first love was a cat that used to lay with me all the time. I miss her, and I love her dearly. Kenya. So, the relationship and the continued growth and understanding from a love perspective, because you got to see truth. You got to see wisdom. Now this is truth. You get, well, this is love. What are we talking about? Love? Love. Gift. This is divine. Because there is something that is divinely innate about all of us. We're all connected to the greater existence of the universe. Because why wouldn't we be? Because the entire idea of heathens and the entire idea of whiteness all came from some guy who couldn't tell other people apart. And decided, you know what? I need to know who the heathens are. I need to know who are the people who are not white. They're not pure. They're not purified by God's love or Jesus' sacrifice. You know, that's always been confusing to me. Was it God's love and the fact that you're chosen that makes you who you are? Or is it Jesus' sacrifice and death that allowed you to be whole, to be accepted? Because neither one of them exists. They're a duality of something that never gives you wholeness. Just let that sink in. Take a moment with that. But I'm going to move on from that. There's a lot. There's a lot to consider about existence as a whole. And there's a lot that comes with philosophy. There's a lot that comes with the truth and wisdom. There's a lot that comes with divinity. And having the ability to relate with it and connect with it in a way that's yours, not owned by anybody, because nobody can own you. I mean, believe it or not, nobody can own you. There is no higher individual who can just take everything away from you. However, it can be believed that many people do take from you, but that's a manner of kind of semantics, but at the same time, it also is about whether or not you let those things really play into the life that you live. And if they do play into the life that you live, you're more fumbled and flubbernucked by the truth, because you're not really seeing your life very clearly. Because again, it's not about me who has stolen the pen, or whether or not the pen was stolen in the first place and it was just my pen. Because none of those things are true. The truth is that you feel like you can be stolen from. The truth is that underneath everything, you feel like you have no value in life, so nobody treats you with any level of respect. That would be true. Or you feel like you need to be in control. You need to have power over other people so that you don't feel like they're belittling you and you will never feel weak. That being vulnerable is a weakness, and that means you'll die. Because, well, likely they will kill you because they have the upper hand. This is all things that are playing out in the world right now. There are so many people who believe in so many different things, but they believe in something that isn't divine. They believe in something that just is true that they believe it, but isn't true in the fact that that's the reality of life as a whole. Because that's a misunderstanding. The life as a whole is what animals usually do, which animals do what animals do, because animals don't have to rationalize their actions or stop being what they are to assume that they're going to be something else. I mean, the alpha male pandemic is also very philosophical, because the relationship was born from a misunderstanding about wolves in captivity. And the person who wrote the book disowned the book and was trying his best all the way to his dying days to take that book out, to right the wrongs that were committed by the book. We are not alpha because, first off, there's no such thing. Second off, we're not wolves. Even if it were true, we're not wolves, we're not dogs. Unless you want to be a dog, then what the fuck are you doing being human? Genuine question. You can sit with that. There isn't anything inherently wrong with being a dog or being human, but there is something inherently wrong with us applying things to ourselves that just isn't who we are. And manhood, even if I were to speak of it very plainly, manhood, masculinity as we know it now, it's a facade. There are many different philosophies like Stoicism that just were mistranslated to the point that it's become more of a weakness and a frailty of real manhood rather than showing up as you really are as a man. Because no man really teaches a man how to really be who they are. Because it's service to king, service to country, and that's your honor. Shedding blood of another person, ending the life of a loved one to someone else, was the sign of manhood. And that can't continue. It just can't. We can't continue to look at each other and decide whether or not it's the manliest thing to do to turn our back on each other. The manliest thing to do is to drink the pain away. The manliest thing to do is to hurt and continue to consume the same poison over and over again, to the point where we're comfortably numb. We're comfortably numb with a life where we're constantly seeing people make the connections that we can't make, constantly belonging in lives that we feel we don't belong to, because we're afraid that who we are on the inside just won't measure up, won't be good enough, won't belong anywhere. And that's why truth and wisdom exist. Because recognizing the truth is realizing divinity has always been there, just as much as your own beliefs have. But I don't pick sides. Nobody's divinity picks sides. It's not whether or not you're powerful or you're powerless, it's just, what would you love right now? Just like I would love to see so many men realize, just from listening to this, that there are questions that they never even thought to ask. Like, is this normal? What is masculinity really? Why is it like this? But even if you look at a magnet, yes, a magnet. I don't really have a magnet in here. I just have magnet pieces, but I don't have anything that, clicks together. But if you see that, and you see how a magnet works, masculine is always giving energy. Always. The masculine pole, the positive pole, because it's not really positive and negative, it's masculine and feminine. We'll get into that in the next bit of philosophy. But the relationship here, and the relationship I want to nail for this one, is that it truly is just recognizing how much is just at play when it comes to what we believe, and also what is just inherent within all of us. Because magnets, yes, I'm going back to magnets, is an attraction force. The masculine and who he really is, owning that state, owning the heart of that state, is everything. Because when you own your heart, you own this energy of giving. It's not giving in hopes of receiving something. It's giving because you know there is more that you will get out of life, out of existence. You give because you want to. You give because it serves you. You give because it serves everyone around you. You give because that is the way of a man. You're not giving out of pain. You're not giving out of disrespect. You're not giving in order to show other people how manly you are. You're giving because you choose to be. You're giving because community is something you build through giving. You don't get something from nothing. And oftentimes, man believe himself to be nothing. Nothing until he is given purpose. Nothing until he is given service to serve with. To become something. Rather than man being something. Being something already. Just as much as I could speak to that, I can also speak to the feminine. The relationship with the feminine was never this stand-in for pettiness or one-upmanship or needing to catch up, needing to prove something to dad. I don't need dad to validate who I am. I never needed dad to validate who I am. Because I receive everything that I need to receive from life. I receive everything I need in the moment. That's why the feminine is so strong in intuition. The ability to understand a situation, take in information, and just know things inherently without needing to try. Because feminine is comfortable in the ability to receive information. Man does not recognize what it means to feel and what it means to accept what one feels, to accept reality as is, accept how things are going, accept that man feels lost at times, when feminine gets to have those emotions, gets to know those things early on, and gets to get very deep in understanding stress, tension, and everything else, because it's just a way of life. It's a way of life for the feminine, but the feminine also realizes there are moments when receiving something isn't a gift. It can be pain. It can be consequences. It can be fear. To know there are things out there that are willing to look at you and desire you in ways that you don't want to be desired. So you take up hardness. You take up emotion that thrusts feminine into receiving brutality. Not because that's what you want. Not because the feminine wants this. But because the feminine doesn't realize just as much as man does not understand how to give. Feminine that does not know how to receive and give will always be in pain. And just as man, lest I receive myself and receive myself as a whole and complete being, I will not honor all the things I can show up to be. Because why would I? I have no purpose. I have no agency. I have nothing. There are kings, there are rulers who have everything, and I am but a simple servant. The time of simple servants and wounded queens and kings needs to come to an end, because everyone has been born into the kingdom of heaven. But what was it that Christ said? You had to be a child again in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. That is very true. You actually have to be childlike in order to embody that kingdom again, because you're in it. The imagination, the playground that kids have when they run around outside, and they can imagine things very vividly. They play in their heads. They play knights, dragons, soldiers, whatever it is that comes to their minds. Princesses, fairy princesses. It's very stereotypical, but more in rulership and ownership of one's own femininity. That is very powerful for young women. They do that all the time. They actually do embody the role that they want, which is why they have purpose and drive, more so, and receive, and tend to be more receptive. When men are usually in third person, constantly acting in ways that is more of a large-scale vision rather than a small-scale vision, you can actually look that up. That is a thing. How do kids play? It is a thing. It is the philosophy of play. Young boys do not embody. They are the filmmaker. They are the ones who create the set and view the set and all the actions. They rarely ever do the actions. In my imagination, when I was growing up as a child, I very much embodied different things. But again, each child is different, but a majority of research shows boys don't necessarily involve themselves in being the main character. Girls do. Girls do take on the role of the princess, the queen, the ruler, the hierarchy. They just do. The roles, oddly enough, are flipped. So, make of that what you will. So when it comes to divinity, when it comes to the divine, when it comes to ownership of yourself, it is the birth of one last piece, which is grace. Grace, like that of a feather. To own one's presence, and I mean that in every sense of the word, to own one's presence, is to embody, invite in, to welcome the masculine, the feminine, because it is a dance. It's always been a dance. It's been the culmination of all of your experiences working in tandem with each other to bring about the wisdom from the truth, and always cycling through that and knowing that there is something that you love through moving through the process of that. This video is actually quite long, but it incorporates a lot of the things that I really wanted to bring in, not only to my life, but also in video form, because there's something magical about being able to read, but there's also something magical about being able to write, and even more so about being able to voice the things that you've learned. There's so much that I've learned in my time here in life, and in connection with these entities, these very specific parts of myself that is incorporated into one, but truly embodies itself through all of the things I just shared. Like truth being more of the kind of dark hat understanding of life and death and all of that stuff, and wisdom being more animalistic and more imbued with charms and medallions and divine just being very simple, not anything other than my white shirt. And grace is just me sitting here with a beautiful feather that I found in my hair and connecting with it. And it is very simple. It's always been very simple. Every aspect of this, I think I'm just gonna upload it straight. I don't need to cut anything. But the relationship of it is just, yeah, having the grace to be who you are, having the connective thread to understand all of the things that have just come into this space. Because I'm inviting you into my space of divine grace, truth, and wisdom. Because all of the aspects, all of the material that I worked with here is all things that are just kind of spontaneous that came with philosophy, and embodying different characters instead of just one makes a lot of sense because of how I see it, how I see the relationship between them. And I see it that way. I do. But also I know divine and grace are one and the same. They connect and they understand each other and they relate with each other fully. Because every aspect that we learn through, every avenue that allows us to ask the questions is truly a part of our experience. To embody this life and to show up in this life, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much. And I really want to embody all of these aspects. I really want to show up for all of the aspects that are true. And all of them are true. Just like all of them are wise, all of them are divine, and all of them are graceful. I wanted to honor my steps into philosophy and to go beyond my steps of philosophy, to invite in my magician, my shaman, my my ancestry, my heart, everything that is me into this video. So whether or not it's a little disorientating is up to you to decide. However, for me, it embodies everything that I wanted to embody. I know it does. It's just very clear to me that it does, because I'm having a great time. I did not expect it to go this way, but I'm delightfully pleased that it was kind of chaotic at the beginning, because I feel like disruptions of one's space has always been this disruptive force. When people feel a little off or a little less candid in the way that they can exist at any given time, they play out characters, they play out events, they play out in fun and play and engagement. All these different ways of existing, and all these different ways of playing with stories, playing with archetypes, playing with like the hero role. But nobody truly understands the divinity at play, because most gods in any story, any mythology, are always petty and extremely personality bound characters. They've got such a huge head. They've got such huge egos. And it is true, if you play a character, you kind of get an understanding of what they're like. And everything is a character. Even just a state of being is a character. Being graceful is a state of character. Being divine is a character. Being truthful is a character. Being wisdom is a character. All of them are characters that we can embody. But really learning how to hone the skill of that is what actually matters most. Because honest and brutally honest is that everything I raised here for philosophy is everything that I raise for myself every single day. There isn't a single time in my life where I'm not asking questions about life itself and getting answers that I kind of just don't always, meet with the most amount of enthusiasm, usually through rebuttals of like what I can't do. But it's because I don't want to face the truth, and it's because I fear what the wisdom will tell me. I fear what the divine will tell me. I don't want to embody the grace that I have here on earth because I feel like it's wasted. It's wasted in a life that felt so minimal in all the things it's created, but that's not it. The grace and the divinity that I have is to see these things and allow myself to be with them. The idea of good and bad just being survival or death, living with that, choosing to live with that, being able to see how people's emotions and thoughts create miracles or poison them, that's just reality. Watching people go through the same cyclical relationship when it comes to tyrants, when it comes to states of affairs and existence in life, it just is what it is. But most people fear what that truly is. To become something is to choose to see both its good and its bad aspects, but so too is its masculine and feminine aspects, because positive and negative just isn't a thing. Masculine and feminine is just baked into everything we do. We either have a very defective masculine approach, defective feminine approach, or we have a well-oiled masculine and feminine approach to everything. We're graceful in the way that we show up, because we show up, because we choose to. I mean, we're here, right? And that's what I really want to leave in this philosophy opener, is that any philosophy, be it Plato's cave, and this idea that you can live, I mean, you can even imagine sitting in a cave, that's all you've ever known, with a flame behind you, casting shadows on a wall, and that's your existence. You mistake yourself for the shadows on the wall, and you never leave the cave. That's what humanity has become. We are the hermits who exist inside the cave because we fear the shadows. We fear the problems that exist, potentially exist, outside, in us. Because, again, we're one with the shadows. We're one with the lone wolf. But also, too, is the old saying, the old Cherokee saying, story actually, is that in truth, it's not whether or not you feed the white wolf or the black wolf. It's whether or not you allow yourself to recognize that both are necessary and that you feed them both accordingly. Because if you ignore the black wolf will attack you when you least expect it because it's starving. If you starve out the white wolf, you'll never know empathy, you'll never know compassion, and you'll never fully recognize what you love. You'll never get your gift, just as much as you'll never truly see the strategy that is at play, that is stopping you from receiving your gift. Both of these worlds live in harmony. The only world we don't live in harmony in is the one in our minds, in our perceptions of what is going on. Because perception is what we're born with. You know, literally everything. If you assume that you have to fight to get what you want, if you assume you have to scream, you have to yell, you have to tear yourself apart to get what you want, that's perception. It has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do with wisdom. It has nothing to do with the divine. It has nothing to do with grace. Because you can live that life. I've lived that life. To drown in it. To feel every day that I'm just not fucking getting it. Because there's something that is going over my head, under the radar, or just, it's alive for me, but I don't know what it is. Because I don't choose to know. I don't choose to put words to it. I choose to run, or I choose to sedate myself with food, or sleeping, whatever it is, with YouTube, with anything that I'm creating, to distract myself. It's all distractions. It's always been distractions. Philosophy is beautiful work because you can always add more philosophy to the world. Because the world needs sages, and better yet, beyond sages, It needs individuals who are willing to ask questions, willing to expose the commonly held deceits that we have towards ourselves and towards each other. We have nothing to gain. We have nothing to gain if we all lose. We have nothing to give if the world isn't there to give to. That's why we're alive. That's why we exist. We exist here to receive and to give, and then receive again, and then give some more, until we eventually move on. We eventually pass on. Because it is inevitable. There's nothing I can take with me. Not a damn thing. There isn't this feather I can't take with me, this I can't take with me, this body I'm not taking with me. Because I arrive just as naked, just as light does. Once the sun is gone, nothing truly remains aside from like material that captures light and causes it to glow. Nothing truly shows whether or not that light existed at all. If I turn off the lights in this room, who's to say they ever existed? Who's to say they ever had an impact aside from this recording? Cheeky, isn't it? The same light that we can mistake for shadows on the wall is the same light that is embedded in every life in existence on this planet. You watching this, me recording this. This feather that keeps its existence is just vibration, is the vibration that makes the light visible. Let that sink in. It is light that allows vibration to be visible. That, in and of itself, is true no matter what you do with light. Plenty of things you can do with light, but the vibration will always be there. And there's presentation to be had. There's so much presentation to be had, actually. It's wild how much presentation there is to be had in the relationship between all the things I brought up. Because regardless of the situation you find yourself in when you stumbled upon this video, I'm telling you, with 100% certainty, there is a gift, there is a talent, there is a light, there is a love that exists inside of you that only you can bring to life. And you must bring light back to life, in life. There is nothing without us being here. There is nothing beyond our lives. And that is important. Because time removes everything except what you give. And you give because you wanted to give. Every philosopher who has died, every person who has written a book, every individual who has experienced this life and have given something to it are remembered for what they've given. Even if they're not a well-known name, even if they're people who just have family members or friends who remember them after they passed on, that is because you gave something that cannot be erased. And no one deserves to live a life where they have chosen to be and do nothing. Because it's never been that. You and I have never been nothing. We started as something, and we just have forgotten what it was like to be that something. So this video and everything that I've put before you, all of this philosophy, all of these verses, all of these stories, all of these pieces from many different angles are all here because they show something very human. And that's, at the end of the day, we all want love, we all want connection, we all have something that we value, we all have something to give. Even if it's just our words, even if it's just the relationships that we create, we all have something to give. And there's many different ways that you can give. Heck, it was me playing through all my characters in this show. is one man show, but it's very, very, very true that each one of them are something that I hold dear because they are parts of me that I got to take back. They're parts of me that I get to remember by giving them my time, by speaking through them, by showing up, by investing my time exactly when this was the most important time for me to do this. Because it's honoring who I am, who I've come here to be. So the only way to have, the only way to do, is to be first. Then you can be, have, and do. You can never just do it to have it, to be it. You must be it from the very beginning, because there has never been anything to do but to be. So, to be or not to be was never a question. It was always be. Because you already are, just as I already am. It is what it is. So it is. So it will be. And to continue philosophy and to continue giving as I choose to is that every aspect, regardless of whichever part you stop on, whichever part you listen to just a little bit longer, there will always be more to be had. Because every ounce of this is things that have lingered with me that are just true. We live in a vessel that holds perception, and we have a heart that is discerning. The heart can pierce any lie. We know when a person is lying, especially if we know them well, and even better when we know ourselves well. We know when somebody is telling us something that is just bunk, something that they don't even believe, something that they couldn't sell to a snake oil salesman even if they promised that it would bring them gold. There is nothing. There is nothing that allows us to differentiate, at least at this time, between the discernment that we're looking for and the perception that we're trapped in. Except getting to know yourself, getting to know the truth, the wisdom, the divine, and the grace that you all hold within you. Because grace also counts as gift. It also counts as presence. Being present. The grace. Much like mobility and the idea of flying through the air or holding yourself in a certain kind of way, that also counts as grace. But so too is the ability to just be present with what's taking place, to grace someone with your presence, to grace something with their bounty, with what you have to give to them, to give them time, a grace period. It is powerful. It is a gift. And it's something you can give, it's something that you can have, and it's something you can embody. Because what are all of these things without grace? And having grace for the experiences that you have. Because this life can be pain. I know many people that I would love to have this conversation with and sit down with that have passed on, that I'll never be able to have this conversation with. But in a way, it's like I am having a conversation with them. I know they have many questions. I know there's things that I can't answer for them, that they can answer for themselves though. Because I know I showed up, and I know what's going to be there for them when they do. And even if I do have my own regrets, and I do have things that I wish I could tell people and be more open about, I know the time will come when I do that. Because even as I create this video, that is the intention, that I'm not holding back. Because what's the point? What's the point of knowing and seeing and witnessing life in so many different ways that nobody else gets to share in. Nobody else gets to thrive through. What's the point? What's the point if we're all in it just to serve ourselves? Just to serve some short-sighted agenda against everyone else? We can do that. I mean, there's value in it, obviously. But it's fruitless, because it's not necessarily about avoiding being a bad person. It's just terrible business. If everyone thinks of you as the bad guy, which is great. I mean, that's great analytics, and it's a great way to get people to pay attention, and it's a great way to draw in a crowd. But ultimately, if you're the bad guy, everyone wants to see you fall. And I'd rather see the tide rise, because high tides raise all sails. And man, do we need sails raised right now. All over the world, because again, it comes with answers. We give our answers, we get replies, and we continue that way, because that's how philosophy worked. That's how philosophers worked for a very long time. They would always answer each other's questions and always ask deeper questions to recognize whether or not the person they're talking to is genuine about their approach, about what they're saying, about how they see the world. Because it's fascinating the way other people see the world. Because nobody sees the world the same way, unless you're a twin. But, I mean, even then, that comes with a caveat. But still, there's value in every voice, and philosophers knew that. That's why we need new philosophers. Why we need a new way of looking at philosophy that allows it to embody the truth, allows it to embody the divine, allows it to embody wisdom and grace for a period of time that doesn't seem to give much grace to everyone equally. So with that, I'm closing this video out with a deep, deep, meaningful, respectful prayer that the God of your understanding sees you, knows what you need, and will deliver it to you. Maybe in a way that you don't expect, but hopefully in a way that you would love to connect with, and will support you in continued growth. But until later, take care.